Hey guys, and welcome back to the Ramble. I am your humble host, Maria Legier, and this is Dominant Privilege. This morning, I got up as per usual, did my regular morning routine, went to the bathroom, ground my coffee beans by hand, made my fancy pants French press coffee, checked my email, walked my dogs, did my casual sideways glance at Twitter, all whilst clenching a crucifix in my right hand and brandishing a tire iron with my left hand. To banish ghosts and goblins, of course. Any Twitter user knows the drill, I suppose. I then sat down in a corner, slammed my head into a brick wall and screamed hysterically at the ceiling for about 20 minutes. All in an effort to soothe that existential dread I've been feeling for the past 30 years, or thereabouts. All the regular stuff any man my age does in the mornings. At least if he has any sense at all. The world took a deep dive into absurdity 20-some years ago. Probably longer. The social game has changed profoundly. The rules we are supposed to follow got so obscure that they are impossible to understand, or to follow. They change all the bloody time according to what best suits the will, whim and winds of the great mangy magnet of woke. We are all equal under the law, see? Except those who get special protection under the law, meant to make them equal under the law. Which makes no sense at all, of course. But nonsense is the new sense, and new sense makes no sense. Though, of course, reason, logic and things of that nature are a patriarchal conspiracy conducted in shady corners of the world by the nebulous and nefarious white men of the world. So don't bother, I guess. The protected groups are a special breed, I am given to understand, deserving of more protection under the law than the other groups. For the other groups are privileged, even when each protected group that are given particular protection under the law is granted privilege. Say bad things about Islam, say, and the thought police will come knocking at your door, dare oppose unfiltered mass immigration, and you may well lose your job. Dare to point this out, and you will be dubbed a racist, fascist, neo-Nazi, and whatever else is currently in vogue to shut you down and dominate the discourse via shame and qualm peddling. Extreme right-wing tinfoil hat-wearing chugger of conspiracy theories. A humble water filter salesman wearing the sleazy, shit-eating grin of a used car salesman. All the while beating your spouse, kids, and dogs. Oh, you're also an incel. Because it does not happen, even when it does. You are exaggerating. Besides, racist scumfucks don't deserve an income, nor do their families deserve to eat. Even if their supposed racism amounts to little more than holding the terrible opinion that immigration ought to be coupled with integration and assimilation into the dominant culture. There's nothing to see here, the thought police will say, in front of a dumpster fire of forbidden books and thoughts deemed not suitable for a moral climate such as ours. All cultures are beautiful. The dominant culture of a nation kind enough to open their borders to immigrants, hospitable but enough to harbour refugees, is an oppressive one to those which it is kind enough to accept. And so, that culture is not beautiful. It is, in fact, so terrible that people are risking their lives to get there, only to then complain about how terrible it is. And so the dominant culture must change its ways. For that is justice, that is truth, that is beauty, that is liberty, that is equality, that is fraternity in our shattered glass house, in our very own eve of destruction. Where I live, the government have no issues and see no problems in stating bluntly that immigrants will be prioritized for public housing. Doesn't seem fair nor equal to me, but then again, I am but a humble moron, and probably a thrice-fisted fascist as well. Must be systemic racism that made the government do it. Or a white savior complex. Cultural differences must be respected. Multiculturalism is the pinnacle of modernity, the peak of morality. A wet dream for putrid politicians, who's been sucking EU dick for eternity, who's been fondling UN balls for decades, all the while having their index finger jammed tightly up the anus of the WHO. A gangbang so depraved, so debauched and so obscene, that it would not be hosted on any porn site for long, no matter the perversity of its visitors or moderators. Even Ron Jeremy would blush. We have freedom of speech, you see, as long as you don't say things that are not protected by freedom of speech. Ahem, say what, come again. I must have misheard. Please, do elaborate. And then follows a phenomenally burlesque song and dance routine in which those who propose that freedom of speech is still alive and well, even if you are not allowed to say certain things or harbor certain opinions for reasons of wrong-thingamajiggers, dance around the issue, never once giving a clear reply to the simple question. How can one pretend to have freedom of speech or equality under the law if certain things are not allowed to be said and certain groups given special protection under the law? Equality under the law ought to be fundamental to the concept of equality. It is, in all honesty, the best outcome one could wish for when chasing this ever-changing and apparently very elusive concept of equality. The new dragon to chase now that heroin is no longer in vogue. To my admittedly plebeian mind, this seems a very simple thing, a very simple concept, and something that ought not to be overcomplicated. But, of course, if there is one thing we are damned good at in this age of abundance, it is overanalyzing and overcomplicating things that are not that complicated, that don't need all that much analysis. A is A, and B is B, say the plebeian. But, say the academics and the elite in forked-tongue tandem, A can sometimes be C, and B might as well be A. In order for perceived equality to be achieved, clear and concise inequality must be implemented, here and there and everywhere. Equality does not mean what you think it means. It is no longer equality of opportunity, nor is it equality under the law. It is equality of outcome, and that, dear friends, is something that must be manufactured and engineered. For it is a ridiculous notion that all people, all groups of people and all individuals, would choose the exact same path through life and thus end up in the exact same place in life. Some will choose this, and some will choose that, and some will choose neither this or that, but something else entirely. There's absolutely no certainty that as many women as men, say, would choose that particular career or this particular profession, and vice versa, of course. And this concept is, apparently, something which the putrid politicians understand to a certain extent. I have not made any secrets of contacting the Norwegian Department of Equality, not that far removed from the Orwellian Ministry of Truth, one assumes, several times when the hypocrisy of certain decrees, laws, whatever becomes painfully obvious. In fact, they told me that they did not wish to hear from me anymore. I must have struck a nerve. I've only contacted them 5 times, so I don't think it would count as harassment. But what the hell do I know? I'm pale, male and stale, see, and so should be ashamed and quiet since everyone everywhere listen to me and give me all this unearned privilege all the time. I contacted them regarding gender quotas in higher education once. Seeing as the majority of students in higher education are women, yet there still being special programs and quotas for women in higher education, I contacted them with a very simple question after looking at the statistics for certain studies. See, the gender studies courses were, at the time I looked at it some 2 years ago, filled to the brink with women. 98% of the students in the nonsensical gender studies courses were women. And so I asked them why they had not put quotas in place to get more men in there. Perhaps some rewards to the men, as it was not that many years ago that women who chose to study some STEM field was given a free laptop. I inquired about this, not because I believe in quotas. I would much rather see the entire concept of quotas and gender studies burned to a crisp, pissed and shat on by syphilitic old lecherous lepers, and then fired into the sun on a rocket ship blessed by the high priest of the Church of Scientology, before I would accept it. But because the rules are supposed to be applied evenly. If less women than men means quotas for women, then less men than women must necessarily mean quotas for men. You know, phony equality and all that. They replied that oh and woe they shared my concern that there were so few men in gender studies. Not that I was in fact concerned, but of course that's how it was framed. But quotas were not the way to go to get more men in there, despite the opposite of course being true should there be more men studying something than women. As we have seen time and again, special quotas, gifts, incentives and, in fact, privilege. On a side note, I also contacted them regarding some taxis that were set up in Oslo by a private company, meant to give women free rides home because women were so at risk for being assaulted herp derp. If memory serves, this was only supposed to last for 4 days. No matter, according to the laws, this is illegal discrimination based on sex and gender. Considering also that men are far more at risk than women are of being violently assaulted, They really ought to give men a free ride home for their safety. I mentioned this to the Department of Equality, only to get a reply that, and I am paraphrasing here, "We have received several complaints regarding this. A case can be made that men are also at risk of being assaulted. Yeah, no shit, Herlock, men are more at risk. The Department of Equality cannot say if this is discriminatory or not." Well then, ain't that interesting? The Department of Equality, supposedly there to check that equality is present, cannot take a stand on whether or not something is discriminatory, i.e. unequal, when men are being quite blatantly discriminated against. But, you know, we must protect the whammons from the men's, and the men's can go fuck themselves. As opposed to the strong and powerful and brave women, men can take care of themselves, despite drowning in male fragility. And this is what our taxes go to: subsidize discrimination and lawful inequality, painted as non-discrimination and presented as equality, all manufactured, all engineered by dancing monkeys, blinding and bedazzling the crowds of gawking onlookers, as the hands that govern us put their shackles and their chains in place, blindfold us and tell us that we are free to see, to do, to walk about and look and speak and feel and think. As long, that is, as we don't see too far, speak too loudly, think too much, walk about over there or round that corner there. This may, of course, seem like hyperbole, as if I am stirring up a storm in a tender teapot. But people do lose their jobs for having the wrong opinion, as well as experiencing violence for it. A teenager just got beat up in Norway by a group of grimy grunts for posting racist memes on Instagram. He then apologized, and the paper and the police interviewed in the paper focused more on him posting this terrible meme, making such a horrid mistake, and subsequently apologizing, than on him being beat up by a group of guffawing grunts high on their moral indignity and hysterical outrage for posting this wrongthink in the form of an edgy meme. And the judgment of the people, on Reddit and elsewhere? I don't condone violence, but he kinda deserved it. Violence for wrongthink is not okay and okay at the same time, in other words. Which makes one think where our freedom of speech and of expression is gone. Violence is quite alright, according to some, if someone says something mean and bad. This is political violence. It is also doublespeak, since they don't condone violence, but they should have known better, and so we can blame the victim of violence for being so rude and obnoxious as to have the wrong opinion, or for posting an edgy meme. He's just a racist, a fascist, a sexist, a whateverist. And besides, he's a white man, and so he is by default privileged scum who ought to take a knee in front of his betters, pledge not to hurt them and, while he's at it, not notice nor complain about the boot stomping on his face. I wonder if the same people would feel the same way were they to be beat up by someone disagreeing with what opinions they hold and choose to share. The answer is, of course not. Shocking as that may be. Consistency is not the strongest character trait of these wondrous warriors for social justice. One rule for me, and another for thee. For that is equality, that is liberty, that is non-gender specific fraternity. Now, to be frank, I am not fond of violence. The only time I can accept violence is as self-defense. And considering how many times the social justice urchins have said that words are, in fact, violence, one wonders if they do, in fact, believe that they are acting in self-defense. That is, if they actually believe anything at all, of course, which one sometimes wonder if they do. That words in themselves can be considered violence is absolute bullshit, in my humble opinion. Yet, that seems to be part of the manifesto of the high and mighty guardians of morality, milkshakes, and a mighty bike lock and lighter fluid of truth and justice. If that is the case, if words are indeed to be considered violence, how long until the words of the social justice crowd are considered an act of violence and people start acting in supposed self-defense against nothing but their words? I mean, kill all men is not exactly a kind and inclusive thing to say. Nor is what that one professor said, "I am dreaming of a white genocide," a particularly nice thing to say. All men are misogynistic or another one. All heterosexual sex is rape. All straight people are homophobic. All whites are racist. Die, cis scum. I could go on and on. But make no mistake about it. I believe people should be free to say this. And people should be free to react to this. with our goddamned words. Except that we are not, in a manner of speaking, free to react to this. We stand to be beat up due to it. The above is not hate speech, according to the peddlers of hate speech laws. Those who write something in opposition to this are guilty of all manner of foul things, apparently, from hate speech to harassment, and get subsequently blocked, banned and beat up, deplatformed, disappeared and doxed, named and shamed and blamed by mass media pundits and politicians, as well as the wider populace, blinded and seduced as they are by these mass media pundits and morally grandstanding, virtue-signalling politicians who care only about the next crop of votes to be harvested from the plebs and peasants. The idea, the very thought of this, is something that terrifies me to my very core. All speech is equally protected, but some speech is more equally protected than other speech, and some speech is banned outright, for that is freedom of speech and of expression, the freedom to not say anything that certain groups of people may deem offensive. This is hate speech, see? A notion that, in itself, is incredibly offensive and quite terrifying, to those of us who believe that everyone should be free to speak their mind, no matter how inane, offensive, or whatever. Unfortunately, we live in interesting times. I am very sorry to say this. And here's to hoping it won't be this interesting in a few years. And that, I think, is that for this ramble. I hope you enjoyed it more than my previous ramblings. Should you wish to support the channel and the blog in whatever way, shape or form, please check out the links down below. And I'll catch you next time. This is Moreology Air, signing off.